Mexican authorities are offering people participating in a migrant caravan towards the United States the possibility of legalizing their status in the country. Honduras saw major mobilizations against its economic development and employment zones, which protesters stress amount to a flagrant violation of national sovereignty. And Australia eased its international border restrictions on Monday for the first time during the coronavirus pandemic, allowing some of its vaccinated public to travel freely and many families to reunite. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. We begin this news brief in Mexico, where authorities are offering people participating in a migrant caravan the possibility of legalizing their status in the country. The National Institute of Migration stated in a press release that members of the caravan had rejected the proposal made by the National Human Rights Commission to transfer them to federal capitals to process the migratory documents that will legalize their stay in the country. Meanwhile, the Mexican government denounced manipulation of the issue of the migrant caravans in the media. Mexican authorities underlined that they are seeking to regularize the status of many of the members of the massive caravans that pass through its territory and reiterated the intention to provide humanitarian assistance to pregnant women, children, and the disabled by issuing humanitarian visas. Now we address other topics. The COP26 conference has begun in the Scottish city of Glasgow. The event is taking place at the Scottish Event Campus, the nation's largest exhibition centre. The COP26 summit will bring global parties together with the aim of accelerating action towards meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Meanwhile, climate activists around the world are demanding the global financial system stop putting money into the use of fossil fuels. As COP26 gets underway in the Scottish city of Glasgow, we take a look at what the event and the expectations regarding its outcomes.
Everyone is talking about COP26, but what actually is it, and why does it matter so much? The UN Climate Change Conference, the official name for climate conferences of the parties, has taken place every year since 1995. The two-week summits are an important space for stakeholders to discuss the climate crisis on a global level. These annual conferences bring together those that have signed the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, an international environmental treaty addressing climate change. This year's conference has been called Our Last Hope to reverse the climate crisis. A recent report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned that the world's pledge to keep global heating within 1.5 degrees Celsius is fast becoming a pipe dream, meaning flooding, droughts, extreme heat waves, and wildfires are set to get much worse. COP26 is a rare opportunity for world leaders to get together and make meaningful change, so there is a lot at stake. Each year, a different world city plays host, and in November it's Glasgow's turn. The UK was poised to do the honors last November, but COP26 was postponed because of the pandemic. Delegates will begin to descend on the Scottish city from the 31st October 2021, with the conference continuing until November the 12th. After launching with the World Leaders Summit, each day will center around a theme, from green transport to protecting nature. Formal negotiations are at the heart of the event, though the main goal are securing global net zero by 2050 and keeping the world within 1.5 Celsius degrees of warming. Developed countries will also be asked to deliver on their promise to raise the $100 billion a year for those most vulnerable to climate change. One of the most important reasons to pay close attention to this summit is that COVID-19 has refocused priorities and caused individuals and governments alike to pay closer attention to the environment. As many countries look to rebuild their economies in the wake of the pandemic, there has been a major emphasis on building back better through a green recovery.
A short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Honduras saw major mobilizations against its economic development and employment zones, which protesters stress amount to a flagrant violation of national sovereignty. Thousands of people took to the streets in Choloma, northern Honduras, to protest against the so-called sovereign cities promoted by the government, which opponents note operate like states within the state. Campesino, indigenous and Afro-descendant movements and communities say the large-scale territorial concessions will result in mass displacement. The presidents and ministers of Bolivia and Peru held the sixth binational meeting of the cabinets of both states in the city of La Paz on Saturday. As part of the meeting, they defined an agenda of over 100 points to work towards the development of their extensive shared border. Our correspondent, Freddy Morales, brings us the details.
This is the first official visit of the President of Peru, Pedro Castillo, to Bolivia. In La Paz, he fulfilled a protocol agenda together with his counterpart, Luis Arce. At the end of the official meetings, more than 100 topics and commitments were announced.
Access to ports such as the Port of Ilo, environmental issues, labor issues, security issues, joint defense against crime, issues related to education and health within the framework of this pandemic that we have jointly addressed.
President Luis Arce highlighted the willingness to serve of the head of the Peruvian state, for which he granted him the highest state decoration of Bolivia, the Order of the Condor of the Andes in the highest degree of the Grand Collar. We have just successfully held the sixth binational cabinet, the result of which in the 4 work areas will allow us to continue advancing in the strengthening and deepening of our mutual agreements and our bilateral relations, with special emphasis on improving the living conditions of the peoples living on both sides of our borders. Of the 100 or so issues and commitments, one of the most important is the opening of the Peruvian port of Ilo as an alternative for Bolivian imports and exports overseas, and actions to combat the pollution of Titicaca, the world's highest navigable lake, shared by both states, whose situation affects over 3 million inhabitants on both sides of the border. To think of Peru is to connect ourselves to the Pacific Ocean. It is to project and expand our trade through the port of Ilo. It is to work together in 5th-generation communications. Brother Pedro, we are very hopeful and developing mechanisms to facilitate border transit and trade. We need to be innovative in binational infrastructure projects, cooperation in health matters, and generation of expanded economic spaces. Measures were confirmed to combat common border problems, such as drug trafficking, human smuggling, and trafficking of persons, vehicle theft, and illegal mining and lodging. Bolivia and Peru share a border stretching over 1,000 kilometers.
Freddy Morales, TeleSUR, Bolivia.
Thank you, Freddy, for this report. Now we continue. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, arrived in Venezuela this Sunday for a 3-day working agenda, in which he will meet with Venezuelan authorities. The visit, which responds to the formal invitation extended by the Venezuelan state through the Office of the Republic's Attorney General, takes place within the framework of the institutional relations that Venezuela has held with the International Criminal Court since its foundation. On this occasion, Prosecutor Khan is expected to learn firsthand the progress of state institutions and establish a dialogue of positive cooperation, as has been done since Venezuela's ratification of the Rome Statute. In the Brazilian state of Sao Paulo, a rescue operation is underway to save firefighters who were trapped in a cave when the roof collapsed during a training season. A group of 26 firefighters were participating in the training exercise when the incident occurred. 3 suffered fractures and hypothermia, and 8 others were rescued uninjured, while 15 remained trapped. Police and emergency health teams have joined firefighters in a desperate effort to free them. And Argentina has unveiled its tallest monument, a tribute to the football legend Diego Maradona. Fans of the late football icon attended the inauguration of the 13-meter-high monument on what will have been his 61st birthday on Saturday, just weeks before the first anniversary of his death. The monument stands in the small coastal town of Santa Clara del Mar, 400 kilometers south of the capital, Buenos Aires. The piece, by artist Sebastián Martino, is named My Love, alluding to the romance between the star and the sport.
Never in my life I did something so big and with such an incredible team. To see that it was taking shape based on what I wanted it to be, what I dreamt and I sketched. When I saw it finished, it was a dream come true actually. It was very exciting. All these people gathered here to attend the dedication of this monument is yet another manifestation of the deep and abiding love that the people have bestowed upon a man who has done everything to deserve it.
And the Haitian population continues to suffer the surge in gun violence and a lack of control by the authorities. In the latest episode of violence in the capital, Port-au-Prince, at least 4 people were wounded amid a shootout at the school as gang members attempted to kidnap students. Haitian police authorities have not yet offered concrete information on the incident. The extreme insecurity in the country has even put the distribution of food and fuel at risk, since gangs are blocking movements from the country's ports, threatening the operations of everything from hospitals to telecommunications. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Australia eased its international border restrictions on Monday for the first time during the coronavirus pandemic to Australian citizens and permanent residents. After 18 months of some of the world's strictest coronavirus border policies that banned citizens from either returning to the country or leaving it, the relaxation of travel rules is tied to rising vaccination rates, with more than 80% of people aged 16 and older in Australia's 2 most populous states, New South Wales and Victoria, fully vaccinated. There are 16 scheduled international flights arrivals at Sydney's airport on Monday and 14 scheduled departures. The airport operator said Foreign Ministry data shows about 47,000 people abroad are keen to return home. And now we go live to Glasgow, Scotland, to broadcast the COP26 UN Climate Change Conference.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 6 years since the Paris Climate Agreement have been the 6 hottest years on record. Our addiction to fossil fuels
is pushing humanity to the brink. We face a stark choice. Either we stop it or it stops us. And it's time to say, enough. Enough of brutalizing biodiversity. Enough of killing ourselves with carbon. Enough of treating nature like a toilet. Enough of burning and drilling and mining our way deeper. We are digging our own graves. Our planet is changing before our eyes, from the ocean depths to mountain tops, from melting glaciers to relentless extreme weather events. Sea level rise is double the rate it was 30 years ago. Oceans are hotter than ever and getting warmer faster. Parts of the Amazon rainforest now emit more carbon than they absorb. Recent climate action announcements might give the impression that we are on track to turn things around. This is an illusion. The last published report on national determined contributions showed that they would still condemn the world to a calamitous 2.7-degree increase. And even if the recent pledges were clear and credible, and there are serious questions about some of them, we are still careening towards climate catastrophe. Even in the best-case scenario, temperatures will rise well above 2 degrees. So, as we open this much-anticipated climate conference, we are still heading for climate disaster. Young people know it. Every country sees it. Small island developing states and other vulnerable ones live it. And for them, failure is not an option. Failure is a death sentence. Excellencies, we face a moment of truth. We are fast approaching tipping points that will trigger escalating feedback loops of global heating. But investing in the net zero climate resilient economy will create feedback loops of its own, virtuous circles of sustainable growth, jobs, and opportunity. We have progress to build upon. A number of countries have made credible commitments to net zero emissions by mid-century. Many have pulled the plug on international financing of coal. Over 700 cities are leading the way to carbon neutrality, and the private sector is waking up. The Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, the gold standard for credible commitments and transparent targets, is managing $10 trillion in assets and catalyzing change across industries. The Climate Action Army, led by young people, is unstoppable. They are larger, they are louder, and I assure you, they are not going away, and I stand with them. Excellencies, the science is clear. We know what to do. First, we must keep the goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius alive. This requires greater ambition on mitigation and the immediate concrete action to reduce global emissions by 45% by 2030. G20 countries have a particular responsibility as they represent around 80% of emissions. According to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, in light of national circumstances, developed countries must lead the effort. But emerging economies too must go the extra mile, as their contribution is essential for the effective reduction of emissions. We need maximum ambition from all countries on all fronts to make Glasgow a success. I urge developed countries and the emerging economies to build coalitions to create the financial and technological conditions to accelerate the decarbonization of the economy as well as the phase-out of coal. These coalitions are meant to support the large emitters that face more difficulties in the transition from grey to green for them to be able to do it. Let's have no illusions. If commitments fall short by the end of this COP, countries must revisit their national climate plans and policies, not every 5 years, every year, every moment, until keeping to 1.5 degrees is assured, until subsidies to fossil fuels end, until there is a price on carbon, until coal is phased out. But we also need greater clarity. There is a deficit of credibility and a surplus of confusion over emissions reductions and net zero targets with different meanings and different metrics. That is why, beyond the mechanisms already established in the Paris Agreement, I'm announcing today that we'll establish a group of experts to propose clear standards to measure and analyze net zero commitments from non-state actors. Second, we must do more to protect vulnerable communities from the clear and present dangers of climate change. Over the last decade, nearly 4 billion people suffered climate-related disasters. That devastation will only grow. But adaptation works. Early warning systems save lives. Climate-smart agriculture and infrastructure save jobs. And all donors must allocate half their climate finance to adaptation. And public and multilateral development banks should start as soon as possible. Third, this COP must be a moment of solidarity. The $100 billion a year climate finance commitment in support of developing countries must become a 100 billion climate finance reality. And this is critical to restoring trust and credibility. I welcome the efforts led by Canada and Germany to help us get there. It is an important first step, but it delays the largest support for years, and it doesn't give clear guarantees. And beyond 100 billion, developing countries need far greater resources to fight COVID-19, to build resilience and pursue sustainable development. Those suffering the most, namely least developed countries and small island developing states, need urgent funding, more public climate finance, more overseas development aid, more grants, easier access to funding. And multilateral development banks must work much more seriously at mobilizing greater investment through blended and private finance. Excellencies, the sirens are sounding. Our planet is talking to us and telling us something. And so are people everywhere. Climate action tops the list of people's concerns across countries, age, and gender. We must listen, and we must act, and we must choose wisely. On behalf of these and future generations, I urge you, choose ambition, choose solidarity, choose to safeguard our future and save humanity, and I thank you.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.